Welcome to the Sustainable Travel Podcast. I'm Emma from That Travel, and we're here with Bianca, who's been traveling in a super interesting way across South America. So, Bianca, could you tell us a little bit about you and what it is that you're doing at the moment?
Okay, so I am traveling through South America by car, and I am doing that with my dog, Zeus, who is currently sleeping in the corner and will not be joining the podcast.
That's so amazing. And so how did you get into this? Like, can you tell us? I know that you and Zeus have kind of a cute origin story. So what happened there and how did you find him?
So I found him when I was living in China in 2021. It's been more than 3 years now. And the funny thing is, I was on a day trip that I had never meant to take with my friend. So it's maybe fate. And we were getting frustrated because it was a Chinese holiday and it's very crowded and we couldn't get into anywhere. The lines were too long. So we decided to walk around a park and we saw Zeus, a little fluffy puppy, and he was with a family. And we're like, oh, that family has the cutest dog. They're blowing bubbles. He's jumping around and following them. And then we realized that the family left and the dog was still behind. And we're like, oh, that's strange. And we saw him going from family to family. It looked like he knew he had been abandoned and was just trying to find someone who would stop for him. And eventually he came up to us, and my friend lost it. She was like, oh my goodness. And the way that I was raised in a Caribbean family, and typically in the Caribbean, dogs are outdoor animals. They're not pets. They don't get names. And so that's how I was raised. And you don't touch strays. So I was just standing there like, oh, he's so cute. And I refused touch him. And she was like, we have to do something, because he smelled like shampoo and his claws were cut. So we knew that he belonged to somebody, and we went door to door in that area to find someone who might recognize him. And eventually we came across a little old lady, and little old ladies know everything in China. And oh yeah, I know that dog. His owner has tossed him out of the car. And we were like, oh no. And at this point, my Chinese wasn't that good. I'm not sure if she said they couldn't keep him or they didn't want to keep him, but either way, like, he was abandoned. And at this point, I was like, oh, that's so sad. But for me, again, a stray is a stray. You're like, oh, that's sad, and then you walk away. And my friend was bawling, tears coming down her eyes. She's like, Bianca, we can't leave him. We can't leave him.
I am her.
And I was like, what do you mean? And she had just gone through a breakup. So they had moved, she moved from a bigger apartment to a tiny apartment, and she already had a cat. So otherwise, I know she would have taken him. Yeah. But I was like, okay, I'll find a shelter in the area. I was in all my WeChat groups like, hey, can people give me contacts? And we're outside for like 30, 40 minutes. My Chinese got magically good while I'm trying to get him into a shelter. Turns out there are none in the city. But I was connected with a pet transport company, and they're like, we can send him to Shanghai for you, because we were going back to Shanghai that afternoon. And yeah, the rest is history. They showed up in 30 minutes, wow. fastest service ever. And they picked him up, and by midnight, because I guess they do other stops, by midnight he was in Shanghai. Wow. And that's how I ended up with Zeus.
I mean, so basically this whole thing was just you being a really, really good friend.
Pretty much. I was going to, because we have shelters in Shanghai. They're not technically legal. They're like one person owned. So they just say like, these are all my pets. Very wealthy people. And I was planning on sending him to a shelter, but while I had him, like, I was like, okay, I need to get him defleed, dewormed, might as well get him his vaccines. And I started training him, and I was like, oh, I guess I already put in this much effort.
Yeah.
Let me keep.
Like, he's literally your dog now. Like, you can't leave him.
Yeah, I was like, okay, this is my dog now, I guess.
I love it. Every time I hear that story on your Instagram or anywhere else, I'm just like, to me, it's crazy because I'm like grew up in the UK and we have dogs as pets everywhere, and I'm such an animal person. So when I hear you
Mhm.
saying like you don't like dogs or you're like not that keen on dogs, I'm like, this woman's amazing. Like you literally took a dog off the street and you don't even like them,
I
but you
like them
like
even less
Zeus.
now that I'm traveling with him because the strays do not like Zeus, which makes me not like them.
Oh, I wonder why,
Like we
because I've seen that before with stray dogs. They get really territorial around like owned dogs.
It doesn't seem to be that problem here. It seems to be that they know he's not from South America because there are plenty of strays around. Like they know each other, and then if people are walking with their dogs, they don't bother them. But when I'm walking with Zeus, I've never recorded this. I should. I should. You will hear dogs from down the block in houses outside. They will start barking as soon as Zeus touches that street corner. They don't have to see him, but they'll
Oh my
just start
God.
barking.
Oh my
Yeah, it's
God, that's crazy. It's like
oh,
that's ultra territorial. Like, wow.
yeah, but it didn't happen when we went to New York. Like New York was fine. I don't know what happened here.
Just the South American dogs, like it's like they can spot he's like a Chinese dog or something. They're like, no, we're not having that here.
It's so bizarre because they'll be fully behind closed doors and we'll walk down the block and you'll just hear like a symphony of barking down the road.
Oh my God, I want you to record that. We definitely need to hear that. I mean, you chose South America, which like I love South America as well, but I mean, was there a reason what drew you to South America in the first place?
Yeah, so there was a point in China in 2022 where they had lockdowns and like things were just going really crazy. And so I was plotting like what am I going to do after China? And I
Plotting.
knew that I yeah, plotting. So I know that I want to visit every country in the world. So, but I don't have a big budget. So I had already covered a lot of Asia. I wanted to do something where I knew that I could continue.
Mhm.
And so my other option was like Africa or Asia, Africa or South America, realistically.
Mhm.
But Africa is quite expensive to travel between countries. That's not going to be it. So South America was the next best choice. I was like, okay, the prices are lower here. I can realistically travel here long term.
Yeah. And from a sustainable travel standpoint, what you're doing actually really ties in really nicely because you're doing the whole thing over land.
Um, yeah, it's definitely more sustainable than taking flights everywhere. And also, like, while when I use the car, I just drive between cities. And then once I get into a city, I typically just use public transportation. I don't
Yeah.
drive in the cities.
Yeah.
Um, Mostly because it is very hectic in cities, but also because it is more sustainable that way. And I usually do public transportation. Like my whole life, I've always been like a train and bus girl. I mean, from New
Yeah.
York, and then Shanghai, all you need is the metro or my electric scooter. um, so like, it's what I'm used to anyway.
Mhm.
Um,
And then I did want to ask you too, obviously this is the Sustainable Travel Podcast. And like, what does sustainable travel mean to you? Because for me, it's so many different things all kind of built into one. Could you like tell us a little bit about what it means to you?
yeah. So for me, sustainable travel is many different things. I wouldn't say in the grand scheme of things, driving is the most sustainable route, but for me at the moment, I think it is.
Mhm.
But I also think of it in terms of like how my actions affect locals. I'm not sure if that's technically sustainable travel, but that's like what I also think about. So, for example, um, when I went to Myanmar, I was weighing a lot of options. Like I think this was last year, 2 years ago, because I was getting a lot of flack. People were like, "Oh, you're supporting the government," and the government is uh, they're in a military coup. So the military is like in power in Myanmar. For those who don't know, and everything that you do, kind of like all the money goes to the military, and they're not in support of the people. They're like harming the people. And so I was thinking about, okay, do I go there and give money to this military, or like, can I somehow balance that out? And so when I went there, I made sure to reach out to locals ahead of time, to get local guides and make sure that I'm always like interacting with them directly and not really going to any big or big organizations. Sure, I can't help the flight ticket, but I can help everything else that I can do while I'm there. So buying, I bought a little backpack because I needed a new backpack. So when I was there, I've got a motorcycle guide actually who was hanging around my hotel, and he was so happy. And then I mentioned, oh, I needed a new backpack. He goes, oh, I have a friend who sells backpacks. So he took me to her shop, and anytime I needed something, a local would point me to another local to support their businesses. So for me, that's being sustainable. And then also, I'm very mindful of gentrification because it happened to my neighborhood very badly. So I always, even though I'm not like moving to a place permanently, I try to avoid anything that might seem like gentrification while I'm traveling. So I try to always pay local prices. So like I'll hang around a shop before buying and I'll just listen. I'll be like, okay, so this person bought this for that price. And a lot of times if you're in like a souvenir area, they're all selling the same thing. So I'll go to one place, try to haggle, go to the next place, see what they'll accept, and just like keep walking around, looking and listening to what locals are buying. Because if you're the person who's willing to pay so much more, then it's not worth it for the shop owners to price their items low and sell to locals at that price, because they're like, well, these foreigners are going to pay this price. Why wouldn't I price it at this?
Yeah. Honestly, I want to do a
like,
standing ovation for what you just said. That is like, I mean, firstly, just to like for any listeners who do not know, sustainable travel is also called responsible travel in its technical definition, and that does include local people, their economy. It's two of the most important pillars of responsible travel. And obviously, it's super important to make sure that it's not just about natural environment, it's also about people. And for me as well, I totally agree with you. I think we can do such damage by just agreeing to elevated prices without even thinking about it. And it can really impact locals in such a devastating way. And I think people think, well, I'm just one person and I don't want to haggle. It's too stressful. And while I can completely understand that, you need to consider how much damage you could do for local people if you don't do that. So, yeah, standing
oh
ovation for
yeah,
me.
for
I would
sure.
stand.
I mean, when I went back home, because before going to my mom's house, which is where I stayed with Zeus, I thought, okay, but maybe I can just get an apartment for a couple months, because in my neighborhood, rent was between like $800 and $1,000 a month in the neighborhood I grew up my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, inflation is a thing. So I was like, okay, maybe it's like $1,200 now. I can handle it. No, $3,000 was the lowest price I saw for a crappy like one bedroom or studio in my neighborhood. And I'm not from Manhattan. I'm from Queens, in like neighborhoods people abroad have never heard of. So I was just like, this is crazy. Who is paying this rent for this area? And that's the thing, is if
Crazy.
people will pay it, the prices are going to go up.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, I do think, it can be people who are just coming through the neighborhood in quite a fleeting way. Like they're maybe not settling. So they're just like, oh, well, it's for a few months while I'm working or whatever. It can do a lot of damage. It's something I'm really really mindful of. But I could go on about that for hours now. So that's amazing. So that's kind of how you practice your sustainable travel, is like through local economies, local people.
Or, oh, even like this, my hair,
Mhm.
so as a Black woman traveling, it's hard to get your hair done. And I'm in a lot of Black groups, and I see how they talk about like different places. Like Colombia is often mentioned. They're like, oh, it's so cheap to get your hair done there. And I always give like this huge tip, and I'm reading it. I'm just like, no, you're going to raise the prices. You're going to raise the prices.
As well, because I think people could possibly misinterpret what you're saying. Like Colombia, the population of Black residents is 55%. So that's
Mm-hmm.
huge. Like it's not like you're just raising the prices for other tourists. Like you're also raising the prices for local people. Like 55% of the population need those
Yeah,
prices very low.
there are huge arguments about it in the groups. They're like, oh, I would never consider not paying more, because if you can't, or if you can pay it, why wouldn't you? And that's the attitude in a lot of these groups. And I'm always just like, please think of the bigger picture because yes, small picture, you are really helping someone out with their day, but big picture, you're harming the community as a whole, which sucks.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, it's honestly one of the biggest arguments in sustainable travel as a whole. Like when you discuss tipping, it's instant kind of red flags, arguments, like and it can go both ways. There are obviously people who think you shouldn't tip at all, and I kind of don't think that's right either. It should be what the culture dictates, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a little bit harder though, because I've tried sometimes to figure out if they tip or not, but that's harder to gauge.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're in a tipping culture, and especially coming from such a big tipping culture.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I'm never sure when to tip and when not to tip.
Hilariously,
But
we have the opposite problem. We like don't tip in the UK at all. It's not a thing. I mean, they've started adding service in restaurants now, but so we always feel like we're like we never know. And then we tip and we're like, was that too much? Was that too little? Should I not have done that?
yeah, I'm never sure how much to tip because for us in the States, tipping is 20%, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know that's too much for anywhere, even if it is a tipping culture. So I'm always just like, is 10% a thing? Do you do $1? Like what is the etiquette? It's so confusing.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, for sure. I always use local guides for that. I'm always like, can you tell me how much I should tip?
And I guess like the main driving factor was that it's so hard to fly with pets, or was it something different?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about how to do this, if I didn't have Zeus, I would have just been taking the bus between countries, like a normal sane backpacker would. But because I had Zeus, the planes just didn't make sense, plane travel. So I had to think. I was like, okay, I could take him on buses, but realistically, I don't know these countries' laws. I don't know if every single country allows dogs on buses. A lot of them do, but a lot of them also don't. And I just had like too much stuff with me as well. So I was like, okay, I need to drive, but I need to learn how to drive first. So I did that.
Yeah, I need to know about this as well. You didn't know how to drive before this trip.
Well, for me, I'm the kind of person where like if something needs to get done, I just do it. It doesn't cross my mind like, oh, what if I can't do this? Like I'm just like, okay, well, I need to drive. I need to learn how to drive. Like, these are the steps I need to take. So I just went back home and I got my license. I took, I think, maybe 9 lessons, and I was like, I feel like I'm okay at this. And then I signed up for the test and I passed it. So,
Oh my God. That's really
yeah.
cool. Like yeah, I mean, you obviously just set a goal and were like, I'm going to do it. I mean, was it ever, for you, was it ever an idea that you would not take Zeus and leave him in maybe kennels or something, or was that never an option?
Um, I've never left him in a kennel. That just doesn't seem like great. Maybe they are. I've never done like a lot of research on it. But the ones that they had in Shanghai, like they'll send you pictures of what they look like, and they look so small. Like they're spacious, but they always look so small to me. I'm like, I can't leave him in there all day. And they say they let him out 2 times a day, and like he gets to play with the other dogs, but it's not like an all day thing. So I just never left him with a kennel. I always just left him with my friend, who I call him his uncle, or a sitter, like a sitter that would come to my apartment and just go through his routine. But it's so much cheaper to do that in China. And I came back home. I was like, maybe I can leave him like with my mom. But her landlord doesn't really like pets. She was nice enough to even let us stay while I was there for a few short months getting my license. But she was like, no, he has to go when you're gone. And I did one 10-day trip to Dominica, and I left Zeus with a sitter in New York, and it was, I think the cost was like $50 a day.
Ooh,
and I just
up.
There's no way, for however long I'm traveling, there's just no shot.
Yeah.
So the only other option was to take him.
Yeah. And has it been hard? Like, have there been things you've had to figure out having him with you, or has it been okay so far?
For the most part, they just need his vaccines, and he has all his vaccines. There was one country, I think it was Bolivia, I want to say, that no, it was Peru, that almost didn't let us in because they needed a specific import permit, which I didn't see that anywhere on their website, but they're like, no, you need a pet import form. And they showed me, and I was like, I don't have that. And they're like, you have to go back to Lima. And Lima was like, I want to say 5 hours from the border. So I was just like, please. Or not to back to La Paz, because I was going from Bolivia into Peru. And I was like, I have all of his other documents, please. And they're like, no, you need to. So I went back to my car about to drive away, and then they ran back. They're like, it's okay, we fixed it. And I don't know what they did. They were just like, just give us his documents. We're going to scan it. And I was still sitting in my car the whole time. They did whatever inside, and they came back outside, and they're like, here you go, he's
Oh my
approved.
God. They just took a liking to you. Like you obviously won them over somehow.
Yeah, honestly, that's the biggest issue, is like getting into the countries. And normally Zeus is not the problem. The car is always the problem. There's always something. I don't know why. There's always something. They're like, oh, you need this extra document or X, Y, and Z, or your license plate doesn't match the title. Because for whatever reason, I bought the car in Chile, and in Chile they add extra numbers onto things. I don't know why. So like my license plate on my ownership title, it's the license plate, and then they add a -4. I don't know what it means. I don't know why they do it, but for whatever reason, most of the other countries, they didn't notice until I got to Colombia, and they're like, what is this?
So we were just talking about the difficulties that you've had with Zeus, and you said it's not been too many, but do want to know, have you had any absolute nightmare travel days?
Yes. I've had, I think, two that stand out the most. One was driving in Paraguay. The roads are just bad there in general, and people don't typically follow the rules of the road, like traffic lights. They just blow through them. Police crossing guards ignored. Do not enter signs ignored. And then on top of that, the roads are very like potholy. But there was one day in particular, I was going from one city in Paraguay to another. I can't remember which two. And I wound up in some crazy back road. No, it was not remotely paved. And it was so stressful because my map didn't I guess the map didn't route this area very well because it's not very well traveled. So I kept turning the wrong direction, and it had been raining, and these are like dirt roads with just lots of, I would say it was more pothole than road. And I was so scared. Like it was one of the few times I've ever been like genuinely scared. My car wasn't going to make it. I was like, what if I get a flat tire? I don't know how to change a flat tire. And I'm driving, and I kept getting stuck in the mud. And if I wasn't stuck in the mud, I would dive like into a pothole because you can't see how deep it was. And it was just, that was one of the worst travel days ever. Like I was fully like near tears. I was just like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to make it. And this was pretty early on in the trip as well. Like I think this was the third country I got to.
Yeah.
And then the other nightmare travel day was somewhere in maybe Argentina. I don't remember where it was. But I was also in between cities, and because that's really the only time I drive. And there was construction, so I got redirected into like a dirt road. Luckily, it wasn't raining, but I got stuck because I guess I hit a rock, like a big rock. And then when I got out of the car to try to move the rock, there were just a bunch of giant rocks under my car. And I couldn't go over them because I was like, I'm going to pop my tire. and the car just wouldn't go over it anyway. And I was trying to move them, and they're so heavy. And I'm not a very strong person. So I was literally just like trying to get the rocks out. And I was like, oh no, it's not coming out. It's not coming out. And I was low on gas. So the car was still on. I was like, oh my God, I'm running out of gas. Like, let me turn off the engine. And I was so worried that like, because I know that this car typically, like if it's low on gas, when I turn off the car and I turn it back on, it's even lower. So I'm just like, no. Oh no, I'm not going to make it. I don't know when the next gas station is. And I'm still trying to get these rocks out. And I was like, I can't do it. There's nobody around because it was just middle of nowhere. And I was just like, oh my God, this is it. I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get to the next place. I don't know how to get my car out of here. I'm stuck. And I was just I'm laughing now, but I was fully breaking down.
No, but at the time, it's like, this is the end. Like my end has come. There's no getting out of this.
I was really like scared. And in the moment I had the thought, I was like, I know I'm going to get through this and I could probably make a video out of this. And I thought, I really did. I stopped for like a second and I was like, am I going to get the tripod? And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do it. And then I went back to the rock and I was like, I got to get this. I do wish though that I did take the tripod out and recorded it. But I was in the moment, I was just like, I just need to get these dang rocks out of here so I can make my way to the next town.
I feel like in the moment that is my thing as a content creator. Like I never get my camera in time for the hilarious moments. And like it's like I know they'll be so funny after, but at the time I'm like, this is not funny. Like
but this was the first time I actually had that moment of I know that this will be good content, but still I was just like, no, Bianca, no. We're not doing this. We need to get this out. You need to focus. You have no gas in your tank.
So what happened eventually? How did you get out of that?
I don't know. I turned into Superwoman. I got the rock out and I was just like hauling it. I just threw it. I don't know how. I could not tell you how. But eventually I got out of that little spot and found the next city. My map was very confused there for a while.
Yeah.
But I got it eventually.
And Zeus was no help whatsoever.
No, he just sits there and watches me.
That's my worst nightmare. I'm really like, I'm such a baby about driving on my own. Like, I'm quite a good driver. I don't mind driving. But if it's just me and there's no one, like, I've just had so many times where I've just wanted, and I just stop. Like, and it's like, you can't stop, you're driving. Like, and I'll just stop and cry and be like, I'm not going anywhere. You're just gonna get me.
Any advice that you give somebody who wants to try and do the same? Because I know there's been challenges for you.
I wouldn't say it's easy. But it's not as difficult as a lot of people were making it out to be. And if you want a sustainable way to travel through countries and the buses are not an option, this is probably the most realistic option there is. I would just say, do not ever do this in Bolivia. That is
Bolivia.
I would never ever advise anyone to live in Bolivia. They have a gas shortage or fuel shortage, and it was really, really hectic trying to get gas in Bolivia. They also, on top of that, the local price is different than the foreign price, which I'm all right with. I'm all right with paying more because they're trying to make sure that locals have enough. It's about 5 times more, though. It's a lot more. I think the gas prices in Bolivia were actually higher than in the States. You have an idea of how pricey it is. But other than that, my other piece of advice is just make sure you have all of your documents ready at all the time, at all times.
Printed, ready, like good to go.
Yeah, because even between cities, not just between countries, you will hit so many police and sometimes even customs checkpoints. They'll always ask for your title or your license or both, and they'll ask for a number of things. And I just have a folder that's on my passenger seat, and I just pull it out. I'm like, here, here, here.
Nice.
Because I'm pretty sure a lot of times, like you said, they might be asking for a bribe.
Yeah.
And then they realize they can't get a bribe from me because I have everything in order. So then usually their go-to after they ask for all the documents, they go, so you don't have any drugs in the car? And I go, no, of course. Usually they laugh. It's like a ha-ha, and then they go away.
Oh, that's so funny. I mean, it's definitely made you more organized then.
Yes, definitely. I have one folder for Zeus's documents and one for the car.
Oh my God, that's so organized. But what's been the best moment then? There must have been like a really standout.
Oh, the best. Oh my gosh. That's so hard. I think maybe seeing Iguazu Falls, that's like a top 10 moment for sure. I couldn't believe it. I've seen pictures and videos of it, of course, but I got there and it literally took my breath away. I straight up was like, I can't believe this is real.
It's really cool. I remember very vividly when we got to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, Murray turned to me and said, "Isn't this amazing? Isn't this the best waterfall you've ever seen in your life?" And I'd been to Iguazu and I was like, yeah.
Oh no.
He was devastated.
And the funny thing is, my mom has been trying to get me to go to Niagara Falls forever, and I just have never been. And now that I've seen this, there's no way I can.
It might be amazing in a different way. It really might.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, to be honest, that was all of my questions except one. I just wanted to ask you, what are you working on at the moment? Where can people find you?
Ooh, okay. What am I working on at the moment? So you're actually probably the first to know, but I've been kind of hinting at it. I'm working on building my own travel, I wouldn't call it a travel agency, like group trip company. So I'm
amazing.
In the middle of putting that together so that it can be a legit company so that I can take people on trips and not be suspicious. Like, I want to organize group trips, starting with China and then branching out to other areas that I've been. Mm-hmm. And ideally, eventually broadening it to specific tastes. So the tours that I'm creating are more like themed. So one would be a food tour, history tour, and another would be focused on nature, different kinds of things like that. And you can find me on Instagram at queenbee_travels. And TikTok is just at queenbeetravels. B is just the letter B, not BEE. And I also have a blog, which is queenbeetravels.com.
Amazing. I will put all of those in the Spotify and YouTube description as well. The traveling, I mean, I just want to briefly ask you about the travel agency because that sounds really cool. I know you're such an expert on China because you lived there for what, 5 years now?
Yes. And I'm going back. So
amazing. And I know even a lot of it was throughout the pandemic, so you really lived that experience.
Oh yeah, that was an interesting time.
So you're definitely someone I would really trust on that. Well, Bianca, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop recording, but you've been an amazing guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. So exciting.
This has been the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You can find all episodes of the Sustainable Travel Podcast on YouTube at that_travel or on our website at www.thattravel.co.uk/the-sustainable-travel-podcast.